Hi guys, it's Kelly Latevola here and I'm back with another video for Neat and Tangled. Today I'm going to be using the foliage frame, the classic Christmas stamps and dies, the typed sentiments stamps, and then the skinny strips dies. So lots of products here. Oh, and then also the enamel dots and then the clear sequins. So the way that this card kind of came about for me, I'm just putting down some repositionable adhesive, like temporary adhesive, so that I can stamp the entire foliage frame on the background without having to use the magnets in my MISTI. And this will just keep that in place, and then when I'm done, I can just rub it off the background. If you're nervous about putting it on the foam portion of your MISTI, you can also fit in like a temporary sheet and put the adhesive on that, and then it'll hold it the same way. So I'm treating it with my embossing bag, and then I'm going to stamp in, I'm using Clear Mark from Nuvo, but any kind of embossing ink will work for this. I'm doing a trapped emboss resist. That's the technique that I'm going to be doing on the two cards, yes, two that I'm doing. First things first, just don't do what I do. When you have a large, isn't that the best way to teach people to make the mistake yourself? So when you have larger clear stamps, you need to be checking for air bubbles. I was kind of in a rush and I didn't take the time to do it, and there ended up being an air bubble in the center of it, and I did get ink on it. You'll be able to see it here in a minute where I left a mark in the middle, but it didn't end up ultimately affecting the card just because of what I was doing, but that's just something that you should be aware of. I'm using clear embossing powder here. Like I said, I want to trap the original color. When you stamp with clear ink on a colored cardstock, you're automatically going to get a tone-on-tone look. In order to increase that some, you can heat emboss it. So clear over top of it will make that contrast a little bit stronger. Here I'm just cleaning up any extra embossing powder, and I got a little overzealous in the center there, and I knocked some off my leaf, so putting that back on. And then I'm just going to heat set this with my gun. Now I let mine run so that it gets really hot beforehand. This is going to reduce warping. I tried doing this with my tweezers, and I would recommend that if you have them, using them, but I didn't feel like it gave me super good control over holding my cardstock, which is why I opted to just do what I've always done over the years, was heat emboss one side and then give it a second to cool off, flip it over, and do the other side. But if you have tweezers that you feel like you have good control with, I would recommend using those. I don't think there's anything wrong with tweezers, honestly. I think it's just me because I'm not used to using them. And then, so I have this like tealish Tiffany blue cardstock. I did the same exact thing, and I'm just heat setting the clear embossing powder on that. So I started to kind of tell you how this card came about. So my friend Jen Shirkus, who's just wonderful and endlessly talented, had posted a card where she had made it was a unicorn birthday card, and then she did the same type of card and turned it into a Christmas card, and she was like, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, and that just stuck with me because she's right. I think a lot of times we feel like we get stuck in ruts, or every card needs to be different, and then we feel like all of our cards look the same. We're constantly looking for different layouts, and I promise you some of the layouts that you've used in the past are wonderful and amazing, and you can totally reuse them and your card will still look different. So here I'm making a Christmas card, but I'm also making just a regular everyday kind of hi friend miss you card. So I'm starting with the shabby shutters, and I want the center to be the focal point, and so I'm going to be adding shading to the outside and slowly but surely getting darker, and you'll see that it's very difficult to see the resist the first time around. It gets much easier the darker the colors get, so just keep that in mind if you want to try that this technique at home with any other cards you might want to make. it's much easier to see if you're trapping a lighter color if you put darker ink on top of it. So I'm just going in a circular motion, starting off the page, blending onto the cardstock to avoid any of those circles. Because I am using distress ink, it is sometimes a little bit more difficult to blend than an oxide, but I feel like it gives much better contrast. My darkest color here is going to be Forest Moss, and this is where you're really going to start to see that embossed resist come through. And then I always do my emboss or my ink blending twice. So you'll see I'm going to go back through that just to make sure that I get a good blend. This will work with any type of image. I just thought that it would be super fun to kind of have this tone on tone technique in the background of my focal point. Plus, I think this stamp is beautiful, and I haven't really got to use it a lot, to be honest. So just going back, through lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest, just like I do my Copa coloring. But yeah, Jen's just, her comment, like, no need to reinvent the wheel, just totally stuck with me when I read it. Because I am that same way, where I feel like all my cards look the same and I'm stuck in a rut and, all that jazz. And the reality of the situation is that's not true. And there are times where when I am stuck, I will go back and look at my older cards and find one that I really love and see if there's a way for me to remake that. Originally, my intention was not to cover everything up with the distress ink, but because I got that like that bubble where I made the impression in the center, I did just cover that up with the lightest color, and I didn't have any issues with that. So I'm going to show you here. I used a slightly wet, like more wet baby wipe. I would recommend using just a damp one that's maybe been sitting out for a little bit, or a slightly damp cloth. And I'm just going to rub that over the embossing to help get off any excess ink, and that'll make the image kind of pop even more from the background. The reason you don't want like a sopping wet one is because distress inks react with water. So if you have one that's super wet, you can pick up the pigment. Here I'm just going to show you the colors that I am going to use, and then I did the same thing. This is the end result with the more teal, tealish blue greens, and then I'm going to set these aside so that I can do the coloring. Now, the Classic Christmas has this really beautiful poinsettia stamp in it, but just because it is a poinsettia doesn't mean that you can only use it for Christmas. Like, I use flowers all the time, year round, and it just depends on how you want to color them, whether or not they, scream Christmas or not. So I'm stamping 2 down because obviously I'm making the 2 cards. I'm going to do one of them the very classic Christmas red and green, and then the other one slightly different. I'm using the same teal colors for the leaves, but I'm going to make the flower orange. For this one, for the shading, I did not do, a lot of times you'll see me do like from the petals out and then from the tips towards, so the highlights in the center. I'm not going to do that with this. I'm going to just add from the base of the petal out. I'm going to use that same flicking motion, super light pressure with just the tip of my marker, and try to vary the length of my flicks because I don't want that wall of color. You want to make sure, especially with layered flowers, that you're maintaining a lighter edge because that's what's going to give you dimension and separation. Don't be afraid of your darker colors. You don't have to put a ton down. You can just do, 1 or 2 lines, but enough that it's going to give you some separation. So same deal, lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest, and that's how the coloring is going to go. As far as life, it's been, so I had my little, if you watched my last video, I had my little meltdown of just feeling super overwhelmed, and then I brushed myself up and got myself back on the horse, and it's a really good thing because on Monday, so I got Peanut up for school. He ate okay-ish, and then, like, right before we went to school, he told me that he needed to go potty. He came out of the bathroom and said that his tummy was a little bit upset, and he asked me for one of the children's Pepto-Bismol, which I'm not necessarily a huge fan of giving him those, but it's something that like his dad has started, and so now whenever his tummy's upset, that's what he wants. So here we are nonetheless. Um, and so I gave him his Pepto Bismol. I asked him if he was okay. He said yes. We got on shoes, coat, go to school. I asked him how his tummy was. He said it was all right. And I said, well, if your tummy still doesn't feel good, then just go to the nurse and then mommy or Nana will come back and get you. And he was like, okay, cool. I walk him to his classroom because he's still, not embarrassed enough of me yet to make me stop doing that. And while I realize he's in first grade and can totally walk himself to his class, I'm going to keep doing it until he doesn't want me to do it anymore, because at some point he will stop asking me to, and I will be sad about it. So, I walk him to his class, I go back out, get in the car. I am not even out of the development yet. When my phone rings, and it's the school nurse, and she's like, Nathan threw up as soon as he got in his classroom. I was like, oh, my poor kid. Just like throwing up in front of everybody. Ugh, so not super fun. So I'm like, let me turn around. I had actually had a doctor's appointment, so on my way driving back to the school, I went ahead and canceled that, and went to go pick him up, and I was like, how you doing? And he's like, okay. I found a bag in my car, gave him that. I was like, did you get it on yourself? And he was like, no, I made it to the trash can. So thank you, Jesus, for small favors that he didn't just throw up all over like the floor or himself or anything that would be more embarrassing than throwing up in front of your entire classroom. um, Back to the card. So for the center, I just picked some yellows and browns to do some shading. For the center, I'll be doing the center the same way for each flower. And I'm just adding the teeniest, tiniest little bits of shading, and I'm not going over it again. It's such a small area. It blended the first time. I don't need to. For the leaves, I went with a yellow-green that's kind of going to match that background. These leaves already have the lines drawn in them, and I'm really just going to spend some time accenting those. I'm going to add the shading where it's coming out from underneath the flower, because anytime two objects come together, we're going to have shading, and anytime one object lays on top of another, we're going to have shading. So this flower is clearly on top of these leaves. And then from there, I'm going to do one line down the center, and then I'm going to follow the lines that are already there, trying very hard to make sure I keep a lighter area in between each line, just to give them some texture. So we get home, my poor, poor, sweet little angel is sick. I mean, he doesn't have a fever, nothing, like no other symptoms besides just the vomiting, but he is for real throwing up. And he's got, I mean, I got to give it to him. He's got pretty good aim. So we're laying on the couch. We got the bucket, which I don't know what you guys grew up with, but for me, my mama always had a trash can that had like a little bit of water in it, just so like it wouldn't stick to the bottom. And then so I just, I'm rubbing his back. He's throwing up, and he just sounded like such a little adult. Because he's like had hanging over the couch, rubbing his back, and I'm like, "You good?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think so." And he starts to sit up, and he's like, "Nope, no, not good." I'm like, "Okay." So then, rinse out his mouth, wipe his mouth off with a washcloth, change out the water, and then we're back at it again. He is pretty much throwing up every hour that first day. So then I ended up staying home from work for just a little bit, and then his dad left work early because as you know, my parents also care for my grandmother, and I was scared to death to send him over to my parents. Not that I want my mom and dad to get sick, but I definitely don't want my grandmother to get sick. And so rather than do that, we just kind of tag teamed taking time off work. So then he went to go stay with his dad. I went to work, and I was getting regular updates, and it just like broke my heart to have to go to work. But he said he still wanted to go to his dad's house, because it just, like, you guys know how it feels when you can't, like, when you're sick and you cannot stop throwing up and there's nothing left, but your body insists It just insists that there is stuff to still get rid of. Um, and so, and especially on their tiny little bodies, it just looks super violent and like it was just heartbreaking. Um, so he was sick until about 5 a.m. on Tuesday. We He didn't throw up at all on Tuesday. He was able to keep down like toast and ginger ale. We opted to keep him home on Wednesday because he didn't get great sleep. So then Thursday he went to school, but then I don't know what was going on. Well, I kind of do. I think my nose started running on Thursday, and like so we had the conversation about the allergies and how I'm allergic to grasses. And I was like, what is going on? Like, it's December. There's no grasses. There's snow on the ground. But I was actually recommended a probiotic because I've had a lot of tummy issues. And so the when I went to go see the doctor, they recommended I try taking a probiotic. Well, they have them in like the yogurt form, but then they also have them in it's almost just like a multivitamin type style, but it's a probiotic. And so I started taking that, and then like I think I was taking it for like 2 days, and then my nose was running like crazy on Thursday. And I was at work and I couldn't get it to stop, and I was like, what is going on? Like, oh, please don't let me be getting sick. It's Christmas. And so then I was doing a little bit of research, and it turns out, which I did not know this, and nobody told me, that there are strains, because probiotics are live bacteria. Basically, if you have tummy trouble, um, it puts good bacteria back into your tummy. Like an antibiotic is like your antibacteria, a probiotic is good bacteria. So, but there are some strains that can build up histamine in your body. Like as your body breaks down that bacteria, it can produce a histamine response, which will mimic allergy symptoms. And I'm already super sensitive, as you guys know. And so that I think that's what was happening to me because I stopped taking the probiotic, and I took a nap, drank lots of water, and then I was fine once I woke up from my nap. So I did, in doing that research, I found that there are other types of probiotics that you can take, certain strains of that good bacteria that do not produce a histamine response. So I will not be taking them again until I get new probiotics. So I outlined all my flowers like I would normally do. I added some white dots just because I think it's fun to add little details like that to my flowers. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the matching dies to cut these out so I can start building my cards. So here it's the same layout, it's just flipped. One's on the bottom and one is on the top. Um, and then I'm going to do the sentiments. So for the Christmas card, I'm using black cardstock, and it's going to say peace, which is from the foliage frame set. There's also love and joy, which would obviously be perfectly acceptable Christmas sentiments. And then the smaller sentiment, the typed font, is from the Christmas, the classic Christmas, and it says warmest holiday wishes. So this is a learning experience for me because you guys know I don't do a ton of die cutting, and so I didn't even pay attention. I just did it the way I always did it. White, heated or treated it with my embossing bag, stamped in clear sticky ink, white embossing powder, and then I just did it the way I always did it. And I found when I tried to cut the sentiment strips that because they're not see-through, they're a solid die, I could not get it right. So what I really needed to do from the very beginning was cut out the strip and then heat emboss on that, which is what I'm doing here. But because I used the same piece of paper that I used before to do the die cutting, I didn't pay any attention to the fact that the section where the tape was is actually where I cut out my sentiments from. So I am stamping these down, doing the same thing that I did before, all of the same prep, and then I'm going to put the white embossing powder on it, and it's going to stick all over the place because I didn't pay any attention to that leftover purple tape residue, which was my own fault. And I ended up getting kind of frustrated. Even, I mean, it was my own fault, but like you can see here, like it's sticking to everything. And now I'm just trying to beat the daylights out of it in the hope it will come off. So this is now the third time. Third time's a charm. And for this, I did use my tweezers, and they worked very well. I think it was just like the big piece of cardstock. I felt like I just didn't have good control over, and then I'm going to go ahead and heat set this as well. I didn't like the blockiness of just trimming these larger words out into a label, so I am just going to fussy cut it and just trim right around it. The teal colored card, I used navy instead of black because I felt like that just matched better. So I'm going to do this for both of them before putting my card together. All of this stuff is going to be popped up on foam tape because I just felt like it needed a little bit of dimension, and I'm doing them, like I said, the same way. The layout is just slightly different. Um, so yeah, so no probiotics for this girl. Well, I'll eat the Activia yogurt because I don't seem to have any kind of response to that at all, and that does seem to be helping. So, but yeah, I'm gonna have to do some more research into the probiotic. So now Nathan is feeling much better. I am feeling much better. Here's hoping that our household doesn't catch anything else before Christmas. We've got like 3 days, 2 days, 2 days to go. Um, and like hopefully like Eric doesn't go down with something. So now that everything's put together, propped up on that foam tape, I'm just going to add in my, this is the enamel dots. I'm using the black ones. And then for the regular everyday card, I am using clear sequins. I'm going to add some glitter to the flowers because I love all things glittery. And then that's going to be pretty much the whole card. So I hope that you see that even like when you have a Christmas set or you have a Christmas card idea or a layout that you love, like you can refurbish that for something else and still have it look completely different or for a different purpose. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.